So I was messing around in game the other day comparing the fire rate on a bunch of different guns, and then I thought, okay, so big number here means high fire rate, and then this is the damage per round. But what's the DPS? What the hell is the DPS on all of these weapons? And then I realized all I need to do is record one of the guns shooting, slow down the footage, count the number of shots in a single second, and bam, I'll have the DPS of every single gun in Helldivers 2. And so this is the DPS of every single gun in Helldivers 2. But first, a word from our sponsor, Outplayed. Outplayed is a totally free Windows app that allows you to record, edit, and send clips to your friends right there in a single app. You don't need any of this stuff anymore. If you want, you can just set it to record your whole play session every time you jump in, or you can tell it to clip only your absolute banger moments. It's just so damn easy. So do yourself a favor and grab Outplayed now. As I said, it's totally free. The link is down in the video description. Alright, let's just jump right into it and I'll show you how I calculated the DPS on all these guns. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is understand exactly what this fire rate number even means. So to do this, I took the breaker shotgun, set it to full auto, and fired off a single clip. The breaker is a good candidate for this because it has a full auto mode, so I know that this number will be accurately represented when I hold down the trigger. It also has a fairly low fire rate, making the rounds easy to count when I slow down the footage, and also the 300 is a nice round number, so it's easy to work with. Okay, so when I slowed down the footage, I found that the breaker fires all 16 rounds in about 3.13 seconds. So if we then divide those 16 rounds by 3.13, we get 5.11. Rounded down to 5 makes it 5 rounds per second. Or you could just look at 1 second of footage and count the number of rounds, and yeah, there's 5 rounds. Okay, so the breaker fires 5 rounds per second. Then, since the breaker has a fire rate of 300, all we need to do is take our 300, divide that by 5 rounds, and we get 60. And that right there is our golden number. 60 rate of fire in Helldivers 2 means 1 round per second. So then if a gun like the breaker has a fire rate of 300, it fires 5 rounds per second. Now if we want to figure out the DPS on the breaker, all we need to do is go 5 rounds times the damage, which is 330, and we get a DPS of 1650. And now we can easily just go to any other gun in the game, take the fire rate, divide it by 60, which again tells us how many rounds it fires in a single second, then multiply those rounds by the damage, and there's our DPS. Okay, so now I just want to talk briefly about takeaways and caveats to this data. The biggest takeaway for me is that it's very clear to see why the breaker shotgun is so popular. It is far and away the most powerful weapon in the game in terms of DPS, outputting a massive 1650 damage per second, compared to something like the Liberator, which does only 587, and the Defender, which does 607. And even something like the Dominator, which is supposed to be an incredibly powerful weapon, only comes in at 833. So the breaker is by far the most powerful gun currently. However, if we look at the number 2 slot, the Knight submachine gun at 1150, this number is really deceptive. The reason is that this weapon has an incredibly high fire rate, making it almost impossible to put every single one of those shots on target. And the only way to actually reliably put them on target would be to switch to semi-auto mode and be more precise with your shots, which of course massively decreases your rate of fire and therefore your DPS. The breaker, on the other hand, even at full auto, it's not that hard to put every single shot at least somewhat on target, making this number a much more accurate reflection of its real DPS. Additionally, I think it's important to say that there are two big problems with representing DPS in this way, beyond just practicality. One problem is some guns like the Peacemaker don't actually have a full auto mode, and so whilst the fire rate is stated as 900, the chances of actually firing off 15 rounds per second on a consistent basis with mouse clicks or button presses alone, it's pretty much impossible. And I think this is the main reason that the developers didn't actually give us a DPS rating in the game. It doesn't actually make sense unless every single gun has an auto fire mode. The other big problem is that armor penetration is a thing in this game, and therefore the armor value of where you hit your target is a key factor in how much damage you're able to output. So I think it's really important to factor in other things into this DPS value. You can't just look at the DPS number and say a higher number equals a better weapon. It doesn't work like that, and you need to look at other things like the traits, the rate of fire, and whether they have an auto fire mode or not. That said, I would say that a good rule of thumb is to say that the lower the fire rate, the more accurate this DPS value is. And that's just because weapons with low fire rates are much easier to put every single shot on target because you're not shooting as fast, as well as the fact that it doesn't really matter if the weapon has auto fire or not, because it's still easy to hit that maximum fire rate even in semi-auto mode. And so based on this, I would say that any weapon that has a fire rate over about 400, which is 6 rounds per second, I think has a somewhat inflated DPS value. So those weapons would be the Knight, the Redeemer, the Peacemaker, the Defender, the Liberator, and the Liberator Penetrator. All of these weapons have fire rates of over 400, and so the chances of you actually hitting all of those shots on full auto mode, if the weapon has it, are very, very slim, and the chances of you actually being able to hit that maximum fire rate in semi-auto mode are basically 0. And so these weapons have inflated DPSs in most situations, and so are actually less powerful than they appear. That's not to say that they're bad weapons. The Defender, for example, is an excellent weapon that I actually highly recommend, but it's just that that DPS value is not really accurate. The Breaker, on the other hand, has a fire rate of 300, which is only 5 rounds per second, which is pretty achievable in semi-auto. And as I said, it's not too hard to hit every single shot, even at maximum fire rate. So based on all of that, my conclusion is that the top 3 weapons in terms of DPS in the game are, in this order, the Breaker at number 1, the Breaker Incendiary at number 2, and the Dominator at number 3. But that's it. The only other thing I want to say is a huge shout out to a Discord member named phoenixrhapsody Herald of War. He put together this awesome spreadsheet, which I didn't actually use when I made this video. I only found it after I'd already done all the calculations myself. But you should go check out his spreadsheet. He's got a bunch more information in his than I put in mine. Definitely worth going to check out, and maybe send him a message on Discord saying thank you. But yeah, that's it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the data, if I got any of the math wrong. I'm not personally very good at math, so this was kind of a different experience for me. And as usual guys, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if not, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.